Hello, my name is Jonathan Isaacson, and the coronavirus brought about a major change within myself as a teacher. When the coronavirus forced classes to be held online, I was thrust into a new role, and it really helped me realize some important things about myself as a teacher. So let me start with a little bit of background, a little character development, if you like, because I think it's really it's relevant to my story. So I've been teaching in universities for 5, almost 6 years now, and I've been a teacher in Japan for about 16 years. I have never been that gregarious, outgoing teacher that students and faculty members like to talk to. I'm not that way in my private life either. I mean, some people might even describe me as reticent. In the past, I have been described as Fukushi by my Japanese colleagues. I am a quiet person. And I've always felt a little bit envious of teachers who are naturally talkative with students. I've always had those colleagues who seem to be popular with students, in part because they're a lot of fun to talk to. And it's a skill that I really wish I were better at. But that's just not the way I am as a person. If I don't know you well, I'm not a fun person to talk to. I know this. But the pandemic has shown me something about that facet of myself. I'll get back to that in a little bit, but I want to continue with my background here for a minute. So as I said, I've been teaching in Japan for more than 16 years, and in universities for more than 5 years. I've only been in my current institution for a year and a half, though. I'm still very much learning my way around the school. I mean, both literally, I still sometimes have to ask where things are, and figuratively. And while I'm fairly new here, the other full-time faculty have been very welcoming and seem genuinely happy to have my input on various projects that we have going as a teaching faculty. One area where I've really felt that my contributions are appreciated is in the areas of educational technology, especially how it relates to developing a paperless classroom. In my first semester here, I shared in faculty development seminars the various steps I had taken to create my paperless classes. So for the 3 years or so prior to the coronavirus pandemic, I had been moving closer and closer to a paperless classroom for all of my classes. And in the last 2 years, really, I've really gotten to the point where outside of textbooks, there is no paper that I use in the classroom. All of my notes, all of my students' assignments, everything has been on my computer, on my students' computers, and on the internet. And ever since I started to work here, I have been sharing those steps that I took to get to that point with my fellow teachers. And several other teachers here seemed genuinely interested in going, if not fully paperless, mostly paperless, and seemed genuinely interested in the steps I had taken. During the winter break between 2019 and 2020 school years, I was planning on transitioning to Google's Classroom as an LMS. I had been using a different LMS for the past 5 years, but having access to Google's G Suite for Education meant that transitioning LMSs made sense. And being a teacher who was pretty familiar with using LMSs for lots of things, this was a fairly simple task, but I was still learning a lot. And being the teacher who was the most familiar with LMSs in general, I was also sharing with the other full-time instructors what I was learning as I was fully immersing myself in the Google Classroom environment. And then the coronavirus started spreading across Japan. There was a lot of speculation about what our school would do, given that we are located in Tohoku, which is not a hotspot of infections. It wasn't then, it isn't now. And while our numbers here in Tohoku, they weren't increasing at anywhere near the rate as in other areas of the world or even in Japan, the numbers were still increasing. And then we did finally get the word that the school year would be delayed initially. Classes would start in mid-May rather than their normal early April start. We weren't yet sure whether they would be in person or online, but there were indications that things would likely be online for the first semester at the very least. And to get ready for this possibility, one of the senior faculty members asked me if I wouldn't mind conducting online seminars for teachers, both full and part-time, to help familiarize everybody with both Google Meet and Google Classroom, as well as other tools, online tools that might be useful in the event that we wouldn't be able to meet our students face-to-face. And it was around this time that it was confirmed that we would indeed be online for the coming semester. Teachers were given the choice of real-time classes on Google Meet or classes on demand, which is pre-recorded videos and prepared assignments on an LMS. So all through April and into early May, I began conducting weekly training sessions for all of the English language teaching faculty, online of course, and I began with the basics of using Google Meet, our school's choice for video classes, before moving on into Google Classroom. While our school does have Google's G Suite for Education, we have another LMS that is the LMS of choice. We were free to use other options like Google Classroom. However, if we were to use Google Classroom or any other LMS, the IT center here would not be able to provide support for the teachers who chose to use an LMS other than the LMS of choice. And so it became especially important to be able to provide that technical support for our teachers who decided to use Google Classroom, which was something that I was being quickly pushed into doing. And actually, pushed isn't really the best word for it. I'd already been figuring out what was and wasn't possible with Google Classroom vis-a-vis other LMSs. And I was pretty comfortable assuming a teacher training and support role at this point. As I said, I'm still kind of learning the ins and outs of Google Classroom myself, but it was pretty clear that I was the most versed in the system and was the best equipped to handle training the teachers in its use. Now, before I did these online training sessions in the previous year, I had only known a few of the part-time teachers, and only in passing. We said hello as we crossed campus or in the buildings when we saw each other, but I didn't really know them. I mean, it's important to remember I'd only been at this university for 1 year at this point, and I still was not in a permanent position. But because of being called to take this leadership role in teacher training, I got to know not only our full-time faculty, but also our part-time faculty a lot better. Honestly, I still feel a bit of the imposter syndrome when they come to me with questions, but that imposter syndrome is lessening, and they do come to me with questions. Other teachers, both full-time and part-time, were obviously feeling as though I knew enough about what I was talking about that they were coming to me for help. And by helping them, by actually giving them useful advice that was solving some of their problems and calming some of their anxieties about these online tools, I was feeling more comfortable with my role as an authority on the topic. I mean, authority is not really the best word, but for lack of a better word, I was the authority. I am the authority on Google Classroom on campus. And it was sometime during this period between the originally scheduled start of classes April and the new coronavirus postponed start of classes in mid-May that one of my coworkers commented that he was very glad that I had been looking into the use of Google Classroom even before the pandemic forced us into emergency online teaching. And the same coworker, he also said sometime later that one of the reasons he was very glad that I was joining them here at this school was my familiarity with educational technology. And it was comments like these that have really helped me realize the importance of my own skill set as a teacher. I will likely never be a gregarious, outgoing person, which means that I will likely never be an outgoing, gregarious teacher that all the students want to come talk to. And while I certainly still feel somewhat envious of those teachers who are naturally talkative and are gregarious and talk with their students, I know that I have something that's also really important. It was because of the pandemic, the coronavirus pandemic, that I have become confident that I have something that my coworkers need. While I don't really feel like an expert, I guess I do have some level of expertise on the systems that we need to navigate teaching in this emergency online setting. And I can help teachers deal with the technological problems and their fears even. I had this one-on-one session with another teacher to help calm them down and reassure them that these tools, they get easier to use once you actually get started. It does get easier. It's almost as if I actually feel needed as a teacher in a way that I don't think I really had before. If I'm being completely honest, there have been a lot of times when I felt like I was an easily replaceable part of a larger system. I've often felt like I'm doing something that anybody with any teacher training could easily come in and replicate and probably do it even better than I'm doing. But this experience has been somewhat revelatory for me. I have realized that I have something important to offer my coworkers. Even if I don't consider myself to be a tech guy, I can't build an app, I can't build a homepage from scratch. I do realize that being tech adjacent is good enough in a lot of situations. I can offer my knowledge to my fellow teachers who can use it and take action on the advice I give them. And by extension, I'm starting to feel as though I can offer something to my students as well. It's that same thing that I can offer to my coworkers. Ever since I made this decision to move towards a paperless class, students in my classes, they get more than just English lessons. They have gotten some technology lessons in the process. To complete my courses, you have to have at least some bare minimum of technological literacy just to be able to complete the assignments. And I'm realizing that this is something that is very useful to my students. In the 21st century, technology obviously plays a central role in so many facets of our life. And being able to navigate in an online computerized environment is something that is beneficial to students. Even if they aren't going to become experts in computing from my classes, they will at least be made aware of some of the possibilities using a computer. And maybe some of them will take it further and learn more on their own. Maybe some of them will just learn enough to survive in my classes. But I know that it is something that's at least useful to them. The coronavirus obviously caused a lot of problems for educators in Japan as well as the world. But I was able to make the most out of a bad situation. I was offered a chance to put my skill set to work, increasing my profile at my university. Even doing this presentation, it really has helped drive home this point. My skills matter. My skills are useful, even if they aren't exactly the ones that I'd like to have as a teacher. There isn't one perfect teacher. I have something that I can offer that will be truly helpful to both my colleagues and to my students. I've made a journey from feeling like a replaceable piece to feeling like a teacher whose skills are valued and needed by both my colleagues and my students. Thank you very much.